Hey, church family. Today we're going to be talking about the solid rock principle of freedom. Before we begin, I want to make sure you have two things. Number one, that you have listened to or read Hebrews chapter 12, and specifically from the version called The Message. It's the version I attached to my weekly update, so hopefully you've already read it or listened to it. If you haven't, take a moment just to go ahead and pause the video and make sure you listen or read that. Second, I hope you have the handout in front of you that goes along with the message. I think it would just make it easier to follow along, and also gives you a spot where you can underline things and maybe write down some questions or thoughts. So hopefully you have those two things with you. So we're in our Vacation Bible School Inspired series called Follow Jesus Here, There, and Everywhere. And we are within a sermon called Do What Jesus Says. And we've kind of taken this sermon and we have broken it out into what we're calling solid rock principles that we can live by. And so the first one, the overarching one that we talked about, was the solid rock principle of love. And so we're focusing on the solid rock principle of love as stated by Jesus in Matthew 22 and John 13. In those two places, Jesus makes it clear, if you are guided by a full-on love for God to please him, and if you are guided by a full-on love for your fellow human being, in other words, if we love each other the same way Jesus loved us, those two loves then provide everything we need to know how to live a God-honoring life in this world. We don't need law. The overarching principle, the solid rock principle of love, guides us. Now, within that solid rock principle of love, we're fleshing out four more solid rock principles that help to bring a little more clarity to the conversation. So, while love is the supreme principle, Jesus taught other solid rock principles to guide us victorious through life and to prepare us for our eternal fellowship and purpose in heaven. Light, worship, freedom, and eternity. So we've already talked about light and worship. I don't know about you, but I have been deeply challenged by those two messages, and I'll give you a heads up. Today's message takes that challenge even deeper. And so today we're focusing on freedom. Next week, we're going to be talking about the solid rock principle of eternity. So let's jump in on the outline. The solid rock principle of freedom. The principle of freedom addresses potential. It explores the question, what is holding me back? Potential is defined as latent, and that word latent simply means existing but not yet known or developed qualities or abilities. So let me say it again. Potential is defined as latent qualities or abilities. In other words, there's things about you and I that we don't even know yet. Abilities and qualities and even spiritual gifts and spiritual fruit that God gives us. We don't even know what those are completely yet. But the things that we do every day will determine whether or not those abilities and qualities have the opportunity to reach the full success that God has intended for them. And that would be our potential. What we do every day determines whether or not that potential will ever be known. Potential is inexhaustible. Very few people can claim to have reached the peak of all human potential in one discipline. When they do, we call them the GOAT, right? The greatest of all time. For the mile run, there was a time when Roger Bannister was the GOAT in the mile run. On May 6, 1954, at Oxford, England, he accomplished something to be humanly impossible, running a mile in under 4 minutes. His time, he just barely made it, 3:59:40. Now, I've run the mile, and on occasion I still run a mile just to see how fast I can do it. I can guarantee you I'm getting nowhere near 4 minutes or 5 minutes or 6 minutes. Sometimes I think if I can get under 7, that would be awesome at my age. The idea of running a mile in under 4 minutes is astounding to me. His feat established the new impossible standard. running a mile under 3 minutes and 50 seconds. That impossibility was overcome 21 years later in Gothenburg, Sweden, by the new GOAT, John Walker of New Zealand, who ran it in 3:49:40. His standard didn't stand the test of time either, because the current world record in the mile is held by a goat named Hikam of Morocco, and his time is 3:43:13. The women's mile goat is Faith Kipyegon of Kenya at 4:07:64. So there's a question now: is a sub 3:40 mile humanly possible for a man? Is a sub 4-minute mile humanly possible for a woman? One thing is certain: someone believes it is possible, and they are laser focused right now on proving it can be done. To succeed, they will dedicate themselves to harnessing the potential of every aspect of life: mental, emotional, spiritual, physical, and relational. Every goat does it. Every one of them. If you listen to an interview or you watch a documentary about any of the goats, what you discover is they had to pursue excellence in every aspect of life. Because whether we're talking mental, emotional, spiritual, physical, or relational, all of those aspects of life are intertwined and they affect each other. So if you allow a crack or laziness in one aspect of life, there's no way. Every goat knows this. There's no way you're ever going to reach your full human potential. And so they have to be laser focused on reaching that potential in every aspect of their life. And so must every person pursuing their personal best. I doubt I'm never going to be the GOAT at anything. And there's a good chance you probably aren't either, so I guess I'm in good company. But just because we're not going to be the greatest of all time doesn't mean we can't seek our PB, our personal best. In the running world, it's your PB or your PR, your personal best or your personal record. Yeah, I may never be the greatest of all time, but I can be the greatest within the potentials that God has given to me. And so for us, we still carry the responsibility, even though we may never be a GOAT, we still carry the full responsibility of making sure that we are reaching our full potential in every aspect of life: mental, emotional, spiritual, physical, and relational. To do so requires freedom. We can't reach our potential unless we are living in freedom. And that's really the heart of where we're heading today. So on the other side of the outline, let's talk a little bit of the truth about freedom. You are free because God has given you of his indomitable spirit. You've heard me say it many times. If God is anything, God is free. It's the reason that we've added freedom or liberty to our list of core values. So his indomitable spirit, it is unconquerable, it is brave, it is determined, it is impossible to deter, to defeat, or to frighten, even in the face of great suffering and death. And so when we read Hebrews 12, and if you go back and read Hebrews 11, and you read about the pillars of the faith and some of the things that they suffered, nothing could deter them from pursuing their full potential in the freedom of God. This is incredibly important and incredibly powerful. Let's look at a couple scriptures. 2 Corinthians 3:17 declares, "Now the Lord is the Spirit, and where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is freedom." In John 8:36, Jesus declares, "If the Son has set you free, you will be free indeed." Galatians 5:1 declares, "It is for freedom that Christ has set us free. Stand firm then, and do not let yourselves be burdened again by a yoke of slavery." So let me make the connection. If we are allowing anything in our life to be in bondage, that lack of freedom will then have a devastating effect on our potential. If we are going to love God with everything we've got, then one of the things that we have to do is to bring pleasure to Him by reaching our highest potential. This is absolutely crucial, and every parent understands it. We invest a lot into our kids, and whether it's education or physical activity or music or drama or whatever it may be, their health, their nutrition, their exercise, all of that investment is given because we want them to be free of any limitation, any bondage that would keep them from pursuing their full potential. So as parents, we seek to keep them free of anything that would create bondage. And as parents, we know if our kids take that investment and then pursue their full potential, as parents, we are honored by what they do. And so we read in the Ten Commandments, honor your father and your mother. Well, how do you do that? You do that by taking everything they have invested in you and then pursuing in freedom your greatest potential. Well, if that's true for us as parents, we would have to know that would be true for God. If we want to honor God, then one of the greatest callings of our lives will be to pursue our full potential. So let's talk a little bit what that looks like. So the disciplines of freedom, I have Hebrews 12 there, and it kind of inspired my list. And the first one is purpose. We receive the stewardship of the sacred trust from risk-taking trailblazers who advanced the mission before us. The purpose found in stewardship defeats the primary enemies of potential, which is aimlessness, meaninglessness, and entitlement. So the great people of the faith have advanced the mission, and then they passed it on to us. So our lives then are defined by the fact that we are now stewards of the mission of God. The people before us sacrificed greatly to pass that sacred trust on to us. And there are generations yet to come that are counting on us to advance the mission and then pass it as a sacred trust on to them. Purpose becomes one of the greatest ingredients in our pursuing our potential. If you don't have purpose, if you don't know why you're on planet Earth, then you are living an aimless, meaningless life. And what often comes out of an aimless and meaningless life is a sense of entitlement. In other words, it should all be about me. I should be entitled to be able to do what I want, when I want. That is not a life of purpose. It actually is a life that is meaningless, just as the writer of Ecclesiastes told us. So the purpose questions then that we have to answer. Why am I here? What is it that I'm aiming for? For those guys and gals who are trying to break new records in the running world, they know what they're aiming for. And that purpose then helps them to make decisions about every aspect of life. That purpose is incredibly important to us fulfilling our potential in freedom. Number 2 is excellence. The disciplined pursuit of excellence removes anything that hinders and entangles, providing the freedom in which potential can flourish and purpose can be accomplished. So here's some potential questions. What is holding me back? Am I in bondage to anything? What am I unwilling to risk in the pursuit of excellence? See, the answer to those questions will show us what is holding us back, what is keeping us from pursuing our full potential. The excellence questions: is this thing I'm doing, is it beneficial? Is it constructive? Is it praiseworthy? Again, we're talking about living by principles and not by lists. So let's just kind of have the rubber meet the road here for a moment. And I'm going to use an example that most of us don't struggle with, but this is culturally understood. So this isn't just about Christianity. This is just about healthy living. So if you're someone who is addicted to something, maybe it's tobacco, maybe it's alcohol, there's a whole list of things that you could be addicted to. The excellence question then asks this: is this beneficial to me? Listen, it could be overeating. It could be eating certain kinds of things. It could be staying up too late to watch television at night. In other words, do I need a law to tell me this is wrong for me? Or by applying the excellence question, can that guiding principle tell me whether this is something I should be doing or not? So whatever it is, ask yourself the excellence question. Is it beneficial to me? Is it constructive? Is it something I could call praiseworthy? Now, the answer to that question is the guiding principle then that will tell you whether or not you should have it in your life. Now, we could give you laws. As Wesleyans, we in the past especially were great at telling you about all the things you couldn't do. I don't want you living by a list of laws. You've got the principle, and now the responsibility for good decision making rests solely in you. You have to answer the question: is this beneficial? Is it constructive? Is it something praiseworthy? Apply that to whatever it is you're wondering about. You'll have your answer to that question. And then the third one is perseverance. Listen, obstacles are everywhere in life. We're surrounded by them. They are allowed by God to provide the motivational energy for the transformational work of overcoming. Overcoming obstacles increases knowledge, wisdom, strength, courage, and faith, greatly expanding our potentials. The scriptures that are listed with all of these, I would encourage you to take some time to read through all of them. Listen, God wants us to reach our full potential. That's not going to happen by giving us everything we want in an easy life. We reach our full potential by overcoming obstacles. It is in the process of overcoming obstacles that we gain all of these things: knowledge, wisdom, strength, courage, faith. The obstacles actually make us stronger. So if we're going to pursue our potential, then we have to understand there are always going to be obstacles, and we must persevere to overcome. By the way, the book of Revelation lets us know one of our nicknames in heaven will be overcomers. It's a part of being on earth. So the perseverance questions: do obstacles defeat me? Do I see them as punishment that induces demotivating guilt, or as discipline that spurs me on to greater maturity and potential? Do I identify as a victim, seeking excuses over solutions? So you can see why perseverance is one of the disciplines of freedom. I don't care who you are, you're always going to face obstacles. You can see them as punishment and live in guilt. You can see them as excuses and live in entitlement or victimhood. What God is calling us to is to hit those obstacles head on and to do everything that we can do to overcome them, because in doing so, what we gain then greatly expands our potential. See, gang, we're free in all of these things. This is what freedom really is all about. And so the solid rock principle of freedom. So for discussion, it is likely that none of us will ever be called the GOAT. Instead, discuss what it means to pursue your personal best. What should that look like? How should that guide your daily decision making? So, and that leads into the second discussion question. Consider daily life and the routines we follow. Are we living up to our potential? And what is one thing you could change to increase your potential? Those are good discussion points. This is a challenging message, and I'll confess, I wish I'd have had more time to work on this one. I feel like it's not fully baked, and so I know that some of what I shared just wasn't where I would have loved for it to be, but I'm praying that God's Spirit will help you to draw out of these thoughts what you need to inspire you in your freedom and the ability then to pursue your full potential in the sacred trust of God's purposes. That's my prayer for all of us. May God's blessing be with you. May your heart be encouraged. May you be challenged with new thoughts and new ideas. May you gain a fierceness to overcome those things in your life that are causing bondage, keeping you hostage, keeping you from pursuing your full potential. May God give you a fierce spirit, an indomitable spirit to overcome. Hallelujah. By God's grace, we can live in it and we can know that victory. Now, may God's Spirit take us into this world to be his salt and light, and we will thank him as we love him and love each other. Amen. God bless you all.